Welcome to the Irish NFL show. It's the 27th of December. I hope Santa was good to you all and brought you that win that advanced you one step closer to the playoffs. I hope the fantasy football playoffs went well for those of you to whom that matters, myself included. Looking forward to the fantasy Super Bowl, I have to say, which is great consolation for the fact that my beloved Bears will be nowhere near Super Bowl for some time to come. It's our preview and picks show for the Week 17 games, really getting towards squeaky bum time now, not actual squeaky bum time for a lot of teams. It's our final Thursday game of the season, of course. There'll be no more Monday night football. Playoff football, obviously great for those that have it to look forward to, but the harsh reality for most of us is that our teams will no longer be involved after the next 2 weeks' action. So we're going to enjoy Week 17 and Week 18 games, and then we will look forward to seeing who actually disputes the destination of the Lombardi Trophy between them. Lots of news floating around as well, as there often is this time of year. No rest for the wicked, even in the festive season. And those of us who are into the NFL and keep our healthy or unhealthy NFL habit ongoing during Christmas know that there's plenty of news breaking, including quarterback changes aplenty. We will bring you through all of those as we preview the games for Week 17, including the doozy, Brian, which is the Ravens-Dolphins game. Both of those teams coming off the back of really big wins over the weekend. It was AFC dominated. The Dolphins obviously taking down the Cowboys, and the Ravens pulling off something of an upset in Santa Clara. What's the line on this one?
Oh, you caught me on the hop for early doors. I better just have a quick check of that. I'm on the QuimBet app as we speak. Didn't think you were going to go that way early on, so just bear with me one moment. But look,
sorry, Colin,
this is surely, I mean, this is because with all the QB stuff, and we'll get into, there's been plenty of it, but like, I mean, this is the Joe Flacco revenge game, and Joe has quite a few, but this is the precursor to what could potentially, if the Browns win this, Joe Flacco going into Baltimore.
Yes, indeed. Before we get to that, sorry, just to answer your question, Connor, QuimBet. Tops are on, thanks to QuimBet for all the merchandise, but QuimBet have the odds for this game. The Ravens are 3.5-point favorites. So I actually thought it might have been bigger going into this game, bearing in mind how comprehensive the win was against the Niners in Santa Clara on Monday night. Was it Monday night? Yeah, going into Stephen's Day. But they're only 3.5-point favorites. It's a big game. Obviously, we're going to come to that later on. The AFC 1 seed essentially is up for grabs. If the Ravens win, they have it. And then obviously then the Dolphins can potentially win it in Week 18, should they go on the road and win this game. Huge game for the weekend. But Colin is right. Connor, like, there's another storyline even in the background lurking, and that's obviously the Browns. The Browns that I said will make the playoffs at the start of the season. And there was some eyebrows raised. Back to you, Connor.
No, there were. And our first segment of games, just to remind you, is brought to you by RuPoint, demonstrating the value of global PR and comms. You can find out how RuPoint can help your business at rupoint.com. The first game, as you've both been saying, on Friday morning, Thursday night football, depending on which side of the Atlantic you sit, is New York Jets at Cleveland Browns. I botched this stat now. I'm just trying to pull it off the top of my head, but I think it's the first time in 30 years that both the Lions and the Browns have made the postseason in the same season, by the looks of it. Browns looking almost guaranteed, not quite mathematically there yet, but I think you can kind of fax that one in. I think it's done. Colin, we come to you first. Jets at Browns, as you say. This was Joe Flacco could have been on the other side of this had the Jets made a different decision. They didn't. The Browns did. They're on their fourth quarterback, and the fact that they keep winning is really doing a lot to help advance Kevin Stefanski's credentials for head coach of the year. How do you see this one going?
Yeah, I mean, Stefanski's done a wonderful job. I think it was interesting last week to see the GM up in the stands or up in the box, and looked like he was enjoying himself for the first time in quite a while. Obviously, has taken a lot of heat for what's going on there. What I think is fascinating here, and what I think people should probably look at, is the way in which Kevin Stefanski has kind of, over the past few years, ruined some of the narratives that are put out there. Because a lot of the time, look, there's a lot of spin involved in all of this, as you'll know, Connor, but people put out narratives around, oh, you don't want to go with a rookie head coach because how are you going to make the playoffs with a rookie head coach? Well, Kevin Stefanski did that. And then a lot of times you'll see teams put out excuses around injured reserve and what you do. And my goodness, the Browns are playing with all sorts of backups, and they've still won 10 games.
Colin, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Bill Belichick a rookie head coach when he took the Browns to the playoffs?
It has been done, and it's actually becoming much more common now. But there's an awful lot of crutches that are reached for. I think in a lot of cities or a lot of places, if they were on their kind of fourth choice QB, there'd be all sorts of excuses being made, but not in Cleveland. Probably because if they didn't make the playoffs, there was going to be some sort of Salem-like witch trial. I think that somebody was going to have to be sacrificed, but it's not going to be Kevin Stefanski. This is a good, I suppose, a good test for Flacco and that offense. Amari Cooper went off last week. He was really enjoying himself. This will be a good test against a Jets defense that hasn't quit, that has shown up. It's one of the bright sparks. Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson, probably the others. But the Jets are running it back again next year. We've kind of had confirmation of that. I was talking about that with Shane on yesterday's show, and essentially what for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers, the player, is going to try to fix the problems that Aaron Rodgers, the GM, has created. For me, I think the Browns are going to have enough to get over the line here, but I do think the Jets will make this difficult for them.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I called the Jets wrong last week. I should have listened to you, Colin, when you said the Commanders had 1 foot on the beach in Cabo. Whether they did or whether they didn't, they played lamentably poorly. I think that was the major factor in the Jets winning. But to be fair to them, one of the more pertinent factors in that game was that Jets defense simply has not quit. And they're going to show up to play against a Browns defense that might dispute the title with them of the best unit on that side of the ball in the NFL. Sooner or later, I think the Joe Flacco Express will run aground, but I don't think it's going to be this week. I think Cleveland will take this one at home. Brian?
It's all about the Jets defense in this early conversation. It's a shame, and you aren't giving more credit to this Browns defense. Over the course of 8 home games, they've only given up a total of 197 yards, both rushing and passing plays. They have a 28% rate on third downs, and they've only conceded 105 points in all their home games. It's a standout defense. Jim Schwartz has done a fantastic job. And you touched on Stefanski. He's now the clear favorite to be head coach of the year, which kind of, again, just kind of reflects what a huge season they've had. It feels like a bit of a trap game, but I don't believe it will, because I think the stakes are too high for the Browns team. I think they'll win this game comfortably. And I think the Jets, now that all these Jets people have been confirmed as coming back, essentially, they're for me the team that are on the beach this week. I think Thursday night is a great game for the Browns to get over the line and confirm their playoff status.
Yeah, no doubt we will spend plenty of time deciding what exactly it is that the Jets are running back, but that's for the off-season. Now the playoff places are still very much up for dispute. Indeed, the Rams unexpectedly contesting for one of them, Colin, as they visit MetLife this weekend to take on the Giants.
Sorry for Brian, but there's only one interesting thing here, and this is to see what this Rams offense can continue to do. They are, I suppose, we talked about it, the Browns, and Brian rightly highlights the Browns defense, right? But which, outside of the Bills, who were kind of a superstar team, but we didn't know. There weren't great expectations for this Rams team. There weren't great expectations, I would say, for the Browns. Which are the team that you would least like to face in the playoffs? On opposite sides, but my goodness, you don't want to go up against that Browns defense. You don't want to go up against this Rams offense. It is Matthew Stafford might be playing the best football of his career. The maturity level that he shows. Mentioned it last night, like he was if people didn't see the video the other day, he had one of the younger players from his opponents come up to him and say, "Oh man, I grew up watching you, I loved watching you," and he went over to the training staff and said, "Oh, I just got the old man treatment." But the maturity level that he is showing, and all the tricks are on show, Connor. The sidearm throws, the no-look passes. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are absolutely reveling in this. They're finding ways to run the ball. You have to be really impressed by the coaching job that Sean McVay has done. for the Giants, it's really about 2024. And I imagine, look, they're going to want to, try and finish strong, but I just feel that this Rams offense is going to have too much for this Giants team, and they're not going to be able to score enough to keep pace with them.
Brian, Colin did you slight the service there saying there was only one interesting thing about this game. The other interesting thing is that the Giants have a QB controversy. How you can have a QB controversy when you don't have a QB is a feat of Christmas magic. I will leave you to explain.
I think it's kind of reversed back to a couple of weeks ago when they made the decision to go with Tommy DeVito as opposed to Tyrod Taylor. And I touched on it on the show at the time that you pay $7 million a year to bring in at that rate and at that amount. Obviously, there was a clear reason behind it because of what happened previously with the previous regime in terms of who they brought in as the backup. And then Tyrod Taylor doesn't get the opportunity to play, and then he brings him in at halftime. At that stage, I would have thought you follow what you've set out, and that is to give Tommy DeVito as much opportunity to play. But he was clearly in a mismatch on Christmas Day, and Tyrod Taylor showed his experience and put them back in the game. Tyrod Taylor has been confirmed now as the starter for this game, but I think one very obvious glaring awareness, it's all back to the quarterback situation. And Art Stapleton did a really good article who writes for the USA Today in the North Jersey piece that the Giants right now are definitely in a position where it looks like they are going to go for a quarterback. Even the insurtive and how they can't decide who to play at the end of the season kind of spells trouble, and it's a quarterback come this draft. Where they finish in the draft obviously is relevant because there's so many people around them. But for me, the Rams will win this game. I think the Giants are going to play hard, but ultimately come up short.
Yeah, I think as Colin, as you were saying at the outset, this Rams team is fascinating, and the way it's shaping up, it looks like, and this is obviously 3D chess at this time of year, but it looks like it would be Detroit hosting the Rams in the wild card round. That's absolute banana skin written all over it. Like, you can imagine Matthew Stafford going in there with a grin on his face, Jared Goff feeling slightly overawed, and you can imagine, like, don't sleep on that Rams defense either. They got some really good pieces that they've added. Kobe Turner in particular, their rookie nose tackle, has been outstanding. I think he leads all rookies in sacks this year. That's been something of a muscle that they've been flexing more and more in recent weeks. I think they're quite a balanced team. They're not quite the finished article, but they're young, they're dangerous, they're quite volatile, as any team with that many rookies and young players will be, but very well coached, as you've both been saying. Look, there's no way that they can't win this one if they have any playoff aspirations. They're aspirations that we didn't think they'd have this year, but they've very much proven that they belong in that in the hunt conversation. And I think they eat what they kill this weekend, and this weekend they're going to be feasting on the G-men. Next game up, Colin, is 49ers at Commanders. We made the mistake of all piling in behind the Niners last weekend, thought they'd take care of business at home against the Ravens. It very much didn't turn out that way. And I don't know whether that's because it's just an aberration. A 4-interception game by Brock Purdy clearly isn't something that's going to happen every week. You certainly don't see them getting turned over by the Commanders, or do you?
I don't, Connor. I do think that was down to the fact that the Ravens have the personnel and a great plan, right? You can't live with this 49ers offense on a down-to-down basis. You have to create chaos. You have to generate turnovers, and they were able to go about that. But they had the personnel to do it. Now, we'll get to them later, Kyle Hamilton, because that could be a big loss there. This 49ers team are still outstanding, though I've said it, the injuries are the concern. And if Trent Williams, when Trent hasn't finished a game, or he hasn't started a game, the 49ers have lost, and that would be an enormous concern. It tells you how important he is. They're also beginning to pick up other injuries on that O-line. I just don't think the Commanders, like Ron Rivera has been trying to save his job, and he's been doing that essentially by trying to say that he's been developing Sam Howell. But when Jacoby Brissett has come in, he has been infinitely better. I mean, Jacoby really, could it have been a somewhat different season if Jacoby had started? Quite possibly. And they're going to go with it. I saw Ian Rappaport, the spin obviously coming out of Washington is that Sam Howell is a little bit beaten up, and this is his opportunity to sit and learn from Jacoby. I can't see the Commanders having enough. I expect the 49ers to get back on track. They have to win out now if they want that number 1 seed. That's bad news for the Commanders. It's bad news potentially for the Rams in that last game. But I believe that they will have enough to take care of the Commanders even on the road.
Yeah, if ever there was a get right game, this is it for me as far as San Francisco is concerned. I wondered, and I'm picking the Niners in this one just to be clear. I wondered though, Brian, to coin your favorite expression, were the 49ers smelling themselves a little bit? You know, going into that game, they looked like the analogy that came to mind for me was 2014 Dublin under Jim Gavin. Like, wasn't enough to win. They wanted to put down a marker against the Ravens and perhaps didn't respect them, and they got ambushed.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think we all got carried away. And like every media outlet that you read and watched last week, and we joked today about Mike Florio's piece last week where he was so adamant that there was a beatdown coming on Christmas night to this Ravens team, and then obviously he's rolled.
Mike Florio, friend of the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been very courteous and generous for his time to come on the show, so we can't give out too much about him. But no, in fairness, he has rolled back, and he's made the story more so about him today than as opposed to what he actually said. But we did, and the 49ers fans did. Like, let's be fair. Like, I spoke to a few 49ers fans last week. They thought they didn't think it was a given, but they thought they'd have more than enough to beat this team. And a team that was missing a couple of players and has a few players potentially missing the game. Obviously, it didn't play out that way in the end, but judging by where they were last week, it looked like some players would potentially not play for the Ravens. But the 49ers need to kind of take a step back and recognize, look, nothing really has derailed them from that game. I mean, it's still all there for them. They win these 2 games, they've got the 1 seed, and they've got a clear cut opportunity to go to the Super Bowl. This game is probably, as you rightly say, Connor, they've fallen on a good schedule here to have the Commanders who in many ways are like the Giants. They have played hokey with the quarterback situation, and now Jacoby Brissett has come back in similar to Tyrod Taylor. They're trying to finish out the season, but ultimately this is a big game for the 49ers, and they'll win going away in my opinion.
Right, next game up is Panthers at Jags. Panthers put up a good performance last weekend. Field goal game against Green Bay, ultimately a very exciting 133-30 finish there. For once, the sun seemed to be shining a little bit on Bryce Young, who had a really good game. Panthers looked like they were putting a little bit of something together. It didn't fall their way in the end, and Green Bay took that one. Jacksonville, 6.5 points favorites here, which for a team that's been struggling over the last few weeks might seem a little bit baffling, but I think it's worth looking at what the Jags' recent schedule has been. So since they beat the Texans narrowly on the 26th of November, they lost an overtime game against the Bengals, that was in Cincinnati, lost against the Browns the following week. They played the Ravens on Monday Night Football on the 18th of December, lost that one quite convincingly. They lost to the resurgent Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Baker Mayfield, and we'll talk about Baker in a little bit. So they've had something of a gauntlet over the last couple of weeks. They've had Trevor Lawrence concussion, Trevor Lawrence now shoulder injury issues, and that hangs and looms like a shadow over this one. But I think the Jags' recent performances are at least half down to Trevor Lawrence's fitness or lack thereof, and half down to just haven't had a real run of tough games where they've either come up against powerhouses in the NFL or come up against the bang form teams. I don't think that's necessarily the case this weekend. I think, look, let's see what happens with Trevor. That could have a huge bearing on the ultimate outcome of this one. But I'm going with the favorites here. I think this is going to be a Jacksonville win. I think the Panthers' performance last weekend, good enough as it was, good although it was, had more to do with the opposition in play there as well. I think this is a tale of 2 recent schedules here. Panthers' maybe schedule has been slightly flattering them. Jaguars' schedule has not been kind in their direction. I think this is going to be a Jacksonville win.
Slightly taken back by Trevor Lawrence's comment, Jesse, that they're a lost side right now. You think he would be pushing in a different direction in terms of trying to motivate everybody, but I think they've found the game to get themselves back in the position. Jags for me, sorry.
Yeah, it's not every week you get to play Joe Barry defense. The Panthers benefited from that. They won't this week. The Jags are in trouble, but they should have enough. I'm going to go Jags.
Brian, Falcons at Bears is the next game up. A couple of weeks ago, Falcons would have probably penciled this one as a handy win and one that they would hope would set them up to win the division. They've been up and down the last few weeks. Bears have actually found a little bit of consistency and some good form in recent weeks, albeit that they have an alarming habit of showing up strong early and then letting teams come back on them late on. Atlanta, went from being in control of the NFC South to now looking up from third place at the Buccaneers. So they got to have this one. It's not quite as important for Chicago, who have their own internal drama to worry about more than the playoff drama. But how do you see this one going?
If I was a Falcons fan, I'd be so frustrated. And you have spoken about this time and time again. Arguably, they're the best team in the division. They've got the best panel of players offensively. They've got some really good players on defense, and yet they find ways to lose games they should win. I mean, to think that they went and lost to the Panthers the previous week, 9-7, return at home and beat a Colts team, and not just beat them. I mean, they comprehensively put them away. And this is the Colts team that right now are sitting in the 7th seed. And the Bears, I've enjoyed the Bears' resurgence recently. It's a good storyline. Maybe the head coach isn't gone yet. I know we've had this conversation. Whether you trust him to be electing, along with the GM, the next few players. Realistically, they're going to pick top 10. With you potentially even number 1 right now. But the Justin Fields story is the one that's going to linger on right into this off season, because he is playing well right now. He had another good game on Sunday. He showed some really positive stuff on the road, albeit they lost to the Browns late on. They went to Minnesota. And I think you asked a question, Connor, about 5 weeks ago. What would he have to do to secure a spot next year? I think he's doing everything he can. This player's not doing things around him, such as drop balls. But it's a tough one to call. I'm going to go Bears. I think there's a bit of a spring in their step. I think we're going to see another Falcons situation where 1 week they're really good, the following week they're let down. I think the Bears win. That'll bring them up to 7 wins. Connor, what do you think is what you would call?
Well, I had said 6 at the start of the season, and there were some eyebrows raised that maybe I was being slightly optimistic, and they're sitting on 6 now, so I'm smug on that one. And anything in addition to that is probably gravy based on the scale of the rebuild that they had to undertake. Now, having said that, you look across the way at the LA Rams, whom we've just talked about, and say, this is what you can do in 1 year if you get your draft picks right, if you nail it. And we know that's a bit of a roulette wheel, and that brings us to the question you've just been talking about. Are the Bears, and it's funny because in Bears fandom and in Bears social media now, the needle's definitely swinging towards, let's go out and get Marvin Harrison Jr., never mind Caleb Williams, to put a few more weapons around Justin Fields. Funnily enough, what happened in Cleveland the other week with that dropped Hail Mary, Darnell Mooney dropping it, has kind of advanced the narrative that, come on, all you've got for Justin Fields to throw to is DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. They don't have enough weapons. What do you expect from him? He's doing the best he can, to your point, under limited circumstances. He's showing up the best he knows how. He's not grumbling. He's getting on with it. He's using his legs when he needs to get out of trouble. He's got the talent. Just let him at it. We'll see whether that's under a new head coach or not. We'll see whether Ryan Poles sees it the same way or not. For now, though, this is not a good game for the Falcons to be heading into, given what's happened in their division. As we said, they've lost control of it. I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers might say they've taken control of the division with the way that they've played and the way Baker has played in particular. We'll get to them a little bit later. But I think at home, Bears defensively more than good enough to hold up to what Atlanta have been able to throw at teams lately. Obviously, Atlanta have some tricks of their own and can show up, but they tend to be up and down week on week. I think this is probably going to be something of a down week. I think the Bears feeling a little bit more confidence, just getting over the line in recent weeks, despite their trouble holding on to leads and closing teams out, has got a bit of momentum going there, and I think this will be a home win. Colin?
The longer the season goes on, Connor, I actually think, disagreeing with the Bears fans, I think the Bears will move on from Fields, because I don't think it's absolutely, if you've gotten to the end of year 3 and you don't know that he is the guy, and I don't think anyone can I like Fields. I actually think Fields would benefit from a fresh start elsewhere. But can anyone absolutely say that he is the franchise guy, that this is the guy you want to, that you're prepared to build around? Because
you can't say that about anyone until you can. And situation and coaching have a huge part to play in that.
Yeah, of course they do. But I mean, the problem is that your cost control it has limited because of the way the Bears handled it early on.
That's a massive factor.
We'll get to Matt Nagy and his impact. He he's ruined and is ruining better QBs than Justin Fields. But to me, you get to the end of year 3. Are you really prepared to go all in? Because you're going to have the number 1 pick, I believe, right, via the Panthers. Are you prepared to say Like, we're not going to go for the number one overall prospect, our guy, whoever we want to choose. Like, are you saying that the Bears would have?
Caleb Williams doesn't want to go there, so that's probably one that you want to be very careful about to be starting.
Yeah,
and
well,
I don't really know if you want Caleb Williams either, given his off-field behavior.
Well, I think that's another story. I think there'll be a huge piece on that. I think Caleb Williams is incredibly talented. I also think he's just trying to control it. But to me, I don't know how the Bears, if it does happen, will end up passing on it. I know that there are plenty of Bears fans who will disagree with that. I just think you get your choice. Are you saying to me that Justin Fields was the guy they absolutely wanted? Now they can have their choice of whoever they want. I think having a QB under a cost control contract for 5 years, when they can actually put a proper development plan in place, I think the defense is much improved, but I'm actually going to say that the Falcons need this more. And I wonder if Arthur Smith has learned a little bit, maybe Arthur Blank going on television to say,
I'm having visions of Homer saying, "Marge, my dear, I've learned nothing."
Yeah, I think, well, it can be, but he finally involved Bijan in the passing game last week. I think that is going to continue. I'm going to say the Falcons will get this, but I think there are happier times on the horizon for your Bears, Connor.
Let's hope so. That brings us to the end of our first segment of Game Picks, brought to you by RootPoint. See how RootPoint can help your business at rootpoint.com. Into our second segment of Week 17 game previews and picks, we move with Lions at Cowboys. This is another tasty one, Brian, with playoff implications very much on the table on both sides of the ledger. Cowboys have come off the boil, unfortunately, after that Eagles win, got it handed to them by the Dolphins late on in their game over the weekend. The Lions have been up and down, and we can see all the flaws, but party town in Motown over the weekend, because they clinched the NFC North for the first time in the history of that division. First time the Lions have won a division in 30 years. First time they've won more than 10 games in 30 years. They haven't felt this good about themselves since the Barry Sanders era. And shout out to the makers of the documentary Bye Bye Barry, if anybody hasn't seen that yet on Amazon Prime. Well worth checking out as part of your festive viewing. But I wonder if now that the Lions are actually over the hump and have gotten that albatross from around their neck, are they going to go really strongly at it now for the next few weeks? Like, you could see how emotional Dan Campbell was on the sideline. Like, and from people I know in Detroit, like, this couldn't be a bigger deal. Don't underestimate how important this is for the city. We talked over the last couple of years about Cincinnati and how everything is coming together behind that Bengals team, historically hapless Bengals team. There's something similar happening in Detroit, if you ask me.
Yeah, I was reflecting when I was looking back at this game. I remember he did a really stellar speech to the team after they beat the Packers in Week 18 last year, in which they lost out on the playoffs, unfortunately, on that last game. And he said something along the lines, this time next year, we'll be the ones celebrating. I can guarantee you. And he's right. They're assured of the division. And I'd like to think that he's done such a good job there that he'd keep the players. What's all the noises out there, and I can understand why all the Lions fans, are celebrating, a friend of ours, Aaron, who's obviously from there. I dropped him a text saying, I hope you're enjoying it. He said it's an unusual experience having waited 30 years. But I'd like to think Dan Campbell can keep the players in check, because if they approach this game in the manner in which they approach the games this season, I think they have a real shot at beating the Cowboys. I think they could be the first team to go in there and win, because over the last 2 weeks, we've seen this Cowboys run defense get absolutely torn up. We saw what James Cook did. And by and large, for large parts of the game last week, we saw most of the others do something similar. It's become a bit of a weak link in the team. And the Cowboys will reflect on 2 tough games, but at the same time, if the Eagles aren't playing at a level in which we've seen previously, and once they look like they have a soft schedule, you'd never know in the NFL what could come of that. And there is still an opportunity for the Cowboys to win the division. I will lean Cowboys. I think because of the home factor and because of how dominant they've been over the course of the season, I think they need a rebound. They need to get themselves on track, because coming to playoffs, we saw it last year. And in the same scenario, they're going to play the Bucs right now in the wildcard game on the road. It's literally a carbon copy of last year, but ultimately they'll be thinking about that divisional game, and potentially that could be against the Eagles, depending on how the playoffs go. But in this one, I think it'll be a tough game. I think it could come down to the end, but I'll lean Cowboys, but it's one that I could see going either way.
Colm, how do you see it? You know, we know how strong the Cowboys have been at home. It's hard to pick against them, but if there's a team that can go in there and win, why not Detroit?
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to Detroit because the Cowboys, I believe, are soft against the run, and you saw that a little bit against the Dolphins team, who I thought did really well given the injuries that they had. I think this will be an incredibly high scoring game. I could see both teams scoring in the 40s because the Lions can't stop the pass, and but I just think they have the weapons in order to take advantage of Dallas, and I think that you saw Jared Goff deal with some of the demons from his past against Brian Flores. It's kind of fitting, I think, that the worst moments of Jared Goff's career to date came against Brian Flores, and the best moment of the Lions last 30 years comes against Brian Flores. I think that was telling. I think that he has been able to, deal a little bit better with pressure, but it's the run game. It's the fact that they have players who what's that Cam Newton phrase, is game breaker. They have guys who are explosive. They have guys who, if people have seen that video, Sam Monson called it, he said sending the Vikings defender into the shadow realm, and that is the case. And I don't think, I think Ben Johnson, they're going to make the most of it, and they should, because this number 1 seed is up for grabs. The Rams are capable. We'll discuss it when it comes, but the Rams are capable of shocking the Niners. And Brad has talked about the Eagles. So could the Lions end up as the number 1 seed? They could. And I think that they are capable of going into Jerry's world and beating the Cowboys. Now, it has to be in a shootout, but I think they can do that.
Yeah, to your point on the shootout, I just checked the odds on QuinnBet there while you were talking. The over for this one's set at 54 points on QuinnBet, so they're very much in agreement with you there, Colin, that this is expected to be a high-scoring game at $27.
That's college type football stuff there, yeah. Connor.
Especially at this time of year, albeit that it's not like Arlington is a particularly seasonally difficult place to go. Other than the fact that you're facing the Cowboys, I've changed my mind about 5 or 6 times while the two of you have been talking. I was fairly certain that this would be a Cowboys home win, but I think a lot of it depends on what the mentality of both teams is. I mean, I think if we know Dan Campbell like we think we know Dan Campbell, I think the Lions have probably tightened up a little bit in the last couple of weeks because of them, how momentous it has been for them to take that NFC North title and what a big deal it is for them. Other teams, more seasoned playoff teams, not quite as fixated on a divisional crown as the Lions would have been, but I think that has held them back a little bit. I think if they're going into this game with looking to put down a statement ahead of the playoffs and send out the message around the rest of their potential opponents, I think this is one that they'll be laser focused on, and I think they'll absolutely want to go in there. Just seeing what the Cowboys have done at home and the way they've been able to score at will at home, and them having come back from Miami with their tail between their legs a little bit, they'll have a serious point to prove as well. Now, backing the Cowboys in these sort of situations over the years has been a bit of a fool's errand, but regular season game at home, week 17, they still potentially have the division to play for there. I'm slightly reluctantly going to go for Dallas in this one and just break the 3-way split anyway, but keep it interesting at that. Brian, Cardinals at Eagles. The Eagles, we talked about the gauntlet that they'd run and how relatively poorly they came out of that one. They went from 10-1 to 10-4 in the space of 3 weeks, and got the wagon back on the rails last weekend. But they haven't looked like the team of last year. The schedule has not been kind to them until this week, which is a homestand against Arizona. Is exactly the type of game that Philadelphia should be winning. Will it turn out that way?
It probably will, but I still don't think it's going to answer any of the concerns and questions that most fans have around the Eagles team. We saw that on Christmas Day, to be up 23 at halftime, and I mean they couldn't get out of the way in the second half in terms of fumble the opening kickoff. They throw it. There's a pick six. Hurts doesn't look up himself. He had 34 yards of rushing over the course of the whole game, and I think 33 of them or 31 of them were in the first half. I mean, they just defensively, their secondary is not what we saw last year, and James Bradbury's having a terrible season. Slay obviously has had injury struggles, and it just feels like whilst they're rocking into the playoffs and potentially will rock in as the second seed, you're talking about the Rams going into Detroit and potentially causing a shock. If it is a shock, like, would it be against the Rams' possibility if the Rams, because of the nature of how this could play out, if they were the team that had to go into Philadelphia as the 7th seed, would it be against the Rams' possibility that they could turn over the Eagles team? Something doesn't sit right. Sirianni doesn't look like he's coaching a team, which we saw last year. They'll win this because I think the Cards are similar to what we saw last Sunday. Play hard for large parts, but go missing for early on in the game. Eagles to win, still not comfortable about where they are right now in terms of their situation running into this playoffs.
Yeah, Cardinals are game, but for me, they can't finish their dinner. It's an Eagles game for me.
Yeah, I'm going Eagles. The Cards are going to have an interesting decision because I think they're going to end up with the number 2 pick, one for the off season.
Indeed, chalk it down. Raiders at Colts, column is our next game up, and all of a sudden, this one looked like it would have been a dead rubber a few weeks ago, but it's now quite spicy.
Yeah, kudos to the Raiders for going in and getting the win, and you could see what it meant to Antonio Pierce. The emotion afterwards. Now, they definitely benefited. Like, the Raiders have played some mad games this season. Like, think about the game against the Vikings, think about the game against the Chargers, and then think about that Chiefs game, because the quarterback didn't play quarterback, right? He was a guy standing on the field. And other than doing some acting where he pretended that the ball was coming to him, he really did nothing. It's incredible that they were able to do it, but it probably speaks more to the Chiefs. I suppose when Shane and I were talking about this yesterday, I put it out there and asked some Raiders fans, Stephen O'Rourke and others. Everyone seems to want him to get the contract, but they are conscious of that, the Vikings game as well. And it is the offense that would worry you. I mean, Patrick Graham has clearly done a great job with that defense. But will Patrick Graham be around? If they can hold on to him, then it probably makes sense. But the way I put it to Shane was, I think you'd want to franchise tag Antonio Pierce. That essentially you want to see him prove it next year before you're prepared to kind of really give a long-term contract. And we'll get on to the folly of giving long-term contracts in a little while, I'm sure. Something that the AFC West has a long history of. I really liked, I will say, I thought the Colts had their worst game of the season last week. I thought they were beaten up. Like, I thought they were outcoached. I thought they were outplayed. But I really liked Gardner Minshew's comments afterwards, where he said that people say, you'll get plenty of playoff chances. That isn't the case. You don't know what's going to happen in the NFL. I thought that spoke to a mindset within the Colts locker room. I think the Colts recognize that they have a wonderful opportunity here because the Jags are reeling, and the Texans, we don't know whether CJ Stroud is going to play or not. I think coming off the back of such an emotional win and having to go on the road gives the Colts an advantage over the Raiders, and for that reason, I'm going Colts.
Brian, as Colin was saying, the Raiders coming off a big Christmas Day win. Colts, obviously, big disappointment and wouldn't have expected that result to pan out the way it did in week 16. But, as Colin was also saying, kind of like the third candidate in one of those party leader elections, they seem to be skating through the gap while the other two split the vote between them.
Yeah, I was taking, Colin was right in terms of it's all there for the Colts, and they've come off a really difficult performance. Some people now, just a nice opportunity to get back, and as I said, the division is still there for them, depending on the Jags scenario. And I think they played through week 18, so it's very much there for the taking. But you're asking which one of these storyline I'm liking so far, and I think Stidham has done a great job. Steichen has done a great job so far. Antonio Pierce has won 4 games, and we should have picked up on something last week, and I didn't. Spagnuolo was a defensive coordinator when Antonio Pierce was the linebacker for the Giants, and he goes in and does a number on his former coach. I'm going to go Raiders. I think the defense, in particular for the Raiders, has really stepped up, and it doesn't probably come as a surprise, bearing in mind Antonio Pierce was such a fierce competitor in his day. The 2 turnovers last week for touchdowns, and the 2 the previous week against the Chargers. This defense is eyeing the ball right now, and the Colts have been doing that for quite a large part of the season in terms of pick sixes. I'm going to go with this Raiders hot hand defense to cause turnovers, give them short yardage, and Zamir White has had a great stellar 2 weeks. Bearing in mind he took over from Josh Jacobs after the quad injury, and I think he will find a way into the end zone. I'm going to go Raiders to cause an upset and make it a little bit of a squeaky bum time for the Chiefs come the final weekend of the season.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Colts. I have to say, coaching matters. I think they've got their guy. Whatever the Raiders do, the Colts are absolutely certain that they have the man they want in charge. I think they've navigated their way to finding the way to win more games than they found to lose. You know, you're going to get a game every now and again like the one they had last weekend. I think overall, though, their heads are in the right place. I think they're heading in the right direction. I think they have the talent and they're making the most of what they have, unlike the Raiders for most of this season, although credit Antonio Pierce for what he's been able to do in recent weeks and even having them in the conversation that we thought they were well out of when Josh McDaniels was in charge. But it's an Indy home win for me. Column Dolphins at Ravens, as we talked about, we mentioned briefly at the start, very much the game of the weekend. Both of them coming off seriously morale boosting wins. And, you know, in the Dolphins case, it was often thrown at them, as it had been, ironically, at their opponents of last weekend. Well, who have you actually beaten? Well, they beat the Cowboys last weekend, and they beat them well. And they no ill effects from that injury for Tyreek Hill, which is a massive piece to have back on the board for them. The Ravens, however, coming off arguably the statement win of the season, rolling into Santa Clara and beating a juggernaut in San Francisco. They seem to have all the answers no matter what questions are asked. Can the Dolphins find a way to win here, or is it a Baltimore homestand?
I think the fact that the Ravens are once again in the game of the week, or the most anticipated game of the week, how Lamar is playing in their record, probably tells you where the MVP will likely end up. And I think they are so impressive on both sides of the ball, Connor. They can beat you in so many different ways. They've dealt with the injuries. Again, I go back to plenty of teams want to make excuses. They lost Mark Andrews. They lost running backs. They've had to rotate tackles. We often talk about the importance of continuity on the O-line, but they are bringing guys in and out because they're dealing with injuries. It's unusual to have tackles on pitch counts, but yet they're doing it. And in McDonald, they have an absolute, like he this is it, like he's going to be gone. So they need to make the most of this. I believe they can, but what they do to you, like the game plan against the 49ers was so good, because we talked about it. You can't keep the 49ers down for the entirety of the game. But what they knew was, the reality is Purdy is the weakest link. You can't stop Debo. You can't stop McCaffrey. You can't stop Kittle. We are going to focus it. We're going to put the attention. It'll be interesting to see what they do, because again, you cannot contain Tyreek Hill for the entirety of the game, even if Jalen Waddle is out now. So I am interested to see what they scheme up. I think, again, the emotion you saw from the Dolphins, it was good to see that. And, you know, the fact that Mike McDaniel was prepared to say, look, we heard the noise and we want to answer the noise. There was also another wonderful clip, if people saw it today, of him with Dan Marino on the sidelines, and kind of as Marino's getting the acclamation, he's saying that they want to come and they want to win a Super Bowl. I think this, you know, I suppose there's emotion involved, the Ravens on the road, but having to play in Baltimore, I think, gives the Ravens that advantage. While they have left things slip through their fingers late in games this year, I think they will have learned from some of that. I'm going to go Ravens in this one.
Yeah, I would agree with that, I have to say. To me, the Ravens are the most resilient team in the NFL. You know, Harbaugh sometimes gets a bit of gyp for the fact that they have this record of playing so hard in preseason games, but they do that for a reason. You know, they have everybody there playing at a certain level, because they know, like every team is supposed to know, that you're going to be down a lot of your starters, and you may be down key players at certain points of the season with the best will in the world. Colm, you've often talked about how the 49ers have the best starters. I think that's one of the reasons why last weekend's game was so significant and so interesting. It's that Baltimore roll with whoever they've got, and the performance level very rarely dips. What they're able to do week in, week out is the envy of most teams in the NFL. We've kind of slept a little bit on the Ravens over the last couple of years because for various reasons they have been hamstrung at the best at key stages of those past few seasons. So they haven't been able to be at their best when they've needed to in the playoffs. If Lamar stays fit, and obviously that's the same question mark you could level over any starting QB, but if Lamar stays fit, it almost doesn't seem to matter the pieces that they have around them, because defensively they're so well coached. Offensively, they've been so well coached. Todd Monken has made such a big difference since he's come in. Brian, we've talked about it at length since we saw them in the flesh in London, about how impressive it was to see the maturity in Lamar and his restraint and how he's not defaulting to the run. And yet, in recent weeks, when he's needed to, he absolutely turns it on. It's still there in the pocket. I think when this team goes to the playoffs, if they get the number 1 seed, we can just fast forward to the AFC. I think they'll be playing in the Super Bowl. They know how important that is, and I think they take this one against the Dolphins, who I really like and really enjoy watching, but ultimately I think still have a little bit of a soft underbelly. Brian.
That's the outlandish statement from tonight's show. Connor, they win this, they're in the Super Bowl. That's where we're going with this one. Mike McDonald. I mean, what's another year? Wasn't that the song? Well, like a year ago when he initially got the job, and the Ravens fans were losing their mind after Tua went in there to Baltimore and threw 6 touchdowns on them, and he went single coverage throughout the whole game on Tyreek Hill. Obviously, he's learned a lot since then, and obviously he's had a fantastic year. The Ravens have lost at home this year. Let's not forget they lost to the Browns. Like, the arc was very dominant at home. There is teams that have gone in there. There's one team in particular, obviously, have gone in there and found a way to navigate victory when they were down by a lot of points. I think in a way the Dolphins winning that game last Sunday is a bit of a monkey off the back, because again, you touched on it there, we've called it so many times. They beat up on poor teams, and yet they haven't found a way to really beat a team with great potential. And last weekend, probably the manner of the victory. I had one Dolphins fan text me saying 2 years ago we would have lost that game because we wouldn't have had the stones to go down the field and get that field goal at the end. The Ravens, are they smelling themselves? Probably not, because they weren't expected to win last week. People doubted them, and they've kind of proven a point, and we saw that. I can't go with the Ravens, because if I do that, we're going to course this for the Ravens fans. So I am going to go with the Dolphins. More so maybe heart over head in this instance. I would like to see Miami be the 1 seed. I think the Dolphins fans have waited a long time to see their team be back in the playoffs and ultimately be back as the number 1 seed. So I'll go Dolphins, cause the upset, if it is an upset, because I think this one could go down to the wire, and I think Dolphins come out. If it's the weather looks okay so far, that could be a factor, because we've seen before with the Dolphins, they struggle in difficult conditions, but it doesn't look like it's going to be too bad in Baltimore, Maryland this Sunday.
All right, Colm, Patriots at Bills. This one is a very interesting game from season to season, and particularly since Sean McDermott has had the helm in Buffalo. It's hard to call. There's a bit of a game within a game. There's a coaching matchup within the coaching matchups. The Patriots have bloodied the Bills' nose on occasion. We talked about the Rams being probably the team in the NFC that heading into the playoffs nobody really wants to play because they're dangerous. The Bills probably arguably are that team in the AFC right now. They'll see this one as one they sorely want and need, and also to avenge an earlier loss to the Patriots this season, lest we forget.
Yeah, and I mean, look, you can't tell me that Bill Belichick wouldn't enjoy getting one over, as he might be on the way out the door, which I think is likely. But I saw the Patriots against the Broncos the other night. Like, if the Broncos hadn't been such a clown show, they should have won that. And the Bills are not, despite the fact that they lost to the Broncos with 12 men on the field, they've improved since then. Now, ultimately, I'm going for the Bills because I believe in Josh Allen. He is sensational even when he's not involved. He's the one who gets the post game press conference comment that gets highlighted. I just think that with everything going around, and yeah, Brian rightly pointed out, they kind of just found a way to fall over the line, but that's what good teams do. And I think that's what they are going to have to do against the Patriots defense. Christian Barrymore was fantastic against the Broncos. He was everywhere. And they will definitely put pressure on. But I think the Bills, unlike the Broncos, will be able to score points. And I don't think the Patriots will be able to score enough points. I don't see this being a blowout type of game. But I think the Bills will keep on track. And yeah, I think nobody is going to enjoy playing this team in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think, look, Josh Allen never goes less than 100%, but a switch really does flick at this time of the season, and he turns the dial up to 11 and does whatever is required. The Bills have that sneaky sort of sense of destiny, team of destiny to me. I think they'll win this one. Don't think it's going to be easy because the games between these two teams very rarely are.
I think this is one of the slam dunks of the weekend. I think this game is going to be one for turning the TV off. Rocking chair spot. Connor, end of third quarter. Bills comprehensively win. They had their concerns last week against the Chargers. I mean, that could have been a game that they thought was going to be a given, and we probably felt it was. On the show last week, we all thought they'd go in there Saturday night in SoFi and put a marker down, but they found a way to navigate a victory in difficult circumstances because it looked like it could be one that got away from. It didn't. I don't think they will be in that situation this weekend. In fact, that it's at home is a huge piece for me. I think this is the Patriots shouldn't have won last weekend, but they did, and I actually thought the celebration mode at the end was quite unique in the sense that Bill Belichick just kind of looked at it going over the bar where other players were celebrating like they just made it to the Super Bowl. Getting away from the conversation, Bills to win comprehensively.
All right, rocking chair game, says Brian O'Leary. Like Mike Florio, we'll have you back in the spotlight next week if the Patriots win, explaining how your confidence was misplaced. Column Titans at Texans. Twice they've been matched up in the last 3 weeks. The last one was a very tight game, ended up going to overtime. How does this one go for you?
It comes down to will Stroud play or not. Ultimately, you saw last week they could not move the ball. I thought Case Keenum, who'd had a good game the week before, but we saw the best and worst of him. If he is capable, if he's good to go, and that is the big question. I think that they are capable of winning. But I do think this will be an absolute kind of divisional drag down knockout. Mike Vrabel is going to do everything he can to drag the Texans down into it, and the Titans. Their D-line, their ability to get at you it causes problems. You saw it against the Seahawks. Ultimately, they needed Geno to do it. But I think if the Texans have Stroud, they really, really need this because, the opportunity is there for them. But if he isn't good to go, I think that the Titans D-line is good enough to feast. Will Anderson Jr. has been beaten up. What will he be good enough to go, because he can feast against the Titans O-line that has been one of their undoings this season. I am going to say that that Stroud will play and that the Texans will get the victory.
Yeah, I'm going to go Titans here. I do like the Texans, but I think they're running on fumes at this time. Nobody likes spitting in your festive punch bowl quite the same way that Mike Vrabel does, and I think this is one of those ones where they go in and spoil the party.
Reports this afternoon is that CJ Stroud will be available to play. And on that basis, I'm similar to Colin. I think the Texans win themselves in a good position to estimate the playoffs.
All right, a 2v1 split is how we end our second segment of Game Picks. Right, let's get into our third segment of Game Picks now, and we start with the eagerly anticipated NFC South clash between the it was looking very much Falcons, as we talked about earlier. Play of Baker Mayfield in particular has changed the narrative in the NFC South.
I think Connor's having some technical difficulties.
Connor, you're there. You're in and out there. Your broadband went a bit haywire, a bit like Derek Carr from one week to the next on offense. I'll run with this one initially. Yeah, look, we saw again last Thursday that when the Saints right now come up against a better side, there's just no match for them. And the score last week was a disservice to the Rams team. It finished 30-22. And Derek Carr started off well, but as the game lingered on, he struggled. And you're talking about earlier on in kind of a defense. What we say, we underestimate this Rams defense, but I certainly think over the course of the season we've probably did a disservice to the Bucs defense. Going into the season, we didn't give them much of an opportunity to be in the mix in this division. We thought it was a rebuild year. But we did touch on in our NFC South preview that he still had a lot of players still there from the Super Bowl era defensively. And that shone through in particular last week against a Jag side. And Baker Mayfield, we got to give it to him. Like, he's been written off so many times. But this year, and it looks like it's a good storyline because it looks like the Bucs want to revisit a contract and bring him back for next year. It's the Bucs for me. If they win this game, they win the division. Stakes are high for them. I think the Derek Carr experience hasn't worked out whatsoever. And I'll be first to put my hands up. I thought the Saints would win this division this year, and I thought they'd even make waves in the playoffs, but I was completely misguided by what I read. Derek Carr has struggled, and it's understandable now as to why the Raiders moved on. It's a Baker Mayfield-led victory for me in Tampa this Sunday, and kudos to all Bucs fans who didn't give up at the start of the season, because a lot of them told me they'd win the division. I thought they were mad.
Yeah, I'm gonna defer to the wisdom of Roy Keane here. I remember Roy Keane saying once that there's a location, there's a team, there's a city that suits every player and manager, and sometimes it takes people a while to find home in sporting terms. I think Baker is home. I think something is happening in Tampa that's changed the narrative there from where we thought it would be at the start of the season. I think they're closing in on something special from their point of view at a time when we thought they'd be kind of tearing it down and thinking about the future. The future is now. You know, they could be. The prize here is a home playoff game in the wildcard round. Like, who doesn't want that from where the season started off? Yeah, there's a huge amount to play for the Saints, but Saints have been one of the disappointments of the season for me. I think the whole is so much less than the sum of the parts there. I don't see the Bucs coming a cropper here at home, or rather, if they do, I don't think the Saints are the team that's gonna knock them off their spot. It's a Tampa win for me, Colin.
Yeah, I mean, I think Baker has matured. I think that's one of the big pieces here, Connor. I think, he came out of college. He was the number one pick. Talked about it with Shane. I think if they had that draft over again, Josh Allen would be the number one pick. But Baker went, and that can kind of go to your head a little bit. And there was huge interest and expectation. Like the number, I know Kevin Clark was talking about this on his podcast. The number of media who went to the Browns training camps when Baker was there those first couple of years, it was enormous. And then it didn't work out there. He went to the Panthers. Things didn't work out there. He went to the Rams, and maybe bouncing around and maybe entering the kind of last chance saloon did have an impact. And I think fatherhood might be another thing that potentially led him to being a little bit more mature. But he does look more mature, and the stories, I think
it'll lead to him being a lot more knackered. Now you're making me think I should rethink my pick.
But like Brian is talking about, they want to get the contract done. That's partly because of the fact that apparently he is a really good influence in the locker room as well. And so we had talked earlier this season, we've talked on and off about like the defensive piece, and Brian mentions them. Anton Winfield Jr. is having a career season. Again, contract year has its funny how that impacts, but he's been absolutely magnificent, and good for him. He deserves it. There's plenty in the owners make plenty of money. We again I think we could probably once again, given Lamar and everything else, the fact that no one was willing, the owners, that was probably a cartel type decision. I can maybe say that, given that we're 58 minutes into this, but what I'm delighted, I suppose, for Baker if he has grown up, right? Because the talent was there. The issue was and players get coddled, and people get coddled, and celebrities get coddled, and he certainly got coddled. But maybe he's grown up, and it's great to see, I suppose, for Todd Bowles, and they have it's night and day from the way this offense looked last year. I do think Dennis Allen will want to ruin the parade a little bit, but I just don't think that the Saints have enough. And ultimately, the Saints are yet another team who are going to be going into the off season wondering what exactly they're going to do at the quarterback position. But I think the Bucs will keep this going. But now, the question I would pose to them, and I've asked this before, how have they not got Mike Evans tied up for next year?
All right, Steelers at Seahawks next game up. I give up trying to pick the Steelers. I can never figure it out. They have me seeing ghosts now. I get it wrong every single time. I spoke to a Steelers fan actually at the watch party in Croke Park when they were playing the Browns, and they ultimately dropped that one. And he said very presciently, and I wish I'd listened. He said, "Yeah, we suck, but so does pretty much every other team in the NFL. We'll be all right." And that's proven to be very correct. They've stacked enough wins against enough teams, some surprising, some less so, but. Do they roll into Seattle and win this one? I think no, which then makes me second guess myself and think I'm not looking closely enough at the Steelers. They had Rudolph with his throw so bright, who guided them to that Christmas Eve miracle win on Christmas Eve. But Seahawks have won consecutive games now. They dropped 4 in that in that skid that they've had, but they very badly need this one now. And I don't know if need trumps want. Steelers are still looking for their own playoff berth to be sealed. This is a tough place to go, though, and I think the Seahawks they have a free enough scoring offense when they hit their groove. It's strength on strength in that sense. I'm talking myself back and forwards, but I think Seattle are gonna win this one, Brian.
I can't be sold on the Steelers. Steelers fans think I dislike them. I don't dislike them. I just think it's reality, the harsh reality where they're at. If you look at that game last Saturday evening, and you look at the opening half, and people are saying this is the first time the Steelers have put up 30 points over the course of 5 or 6 years, and it was the first time they scored 28 points, I think, in 2 years. I mean, that says a lot in itself. But the Bengals couldn't get out of their own way in the first half. They give up that big touchdown. They go straight down the field and give up a needless interception. They go for a 4th down when they probably should have taken a field goal, and they missed that. And then there was the fumble. Okay, I'm getting into the narrative of one particular game as opposed to where we are in this game. What I've seen over the course of the last 2 weeks, and Colin rightly called it out when he went for Seattle to beat the Eagles. Pete Carroll is a fantastic head coach, whether you love him or hate him, he's a fantastic head coach. They lost some games in that run that they probably should have won, and they've got it back on track. They only gave up 17 points last weekend. They only gave small points and small yardage in terms of offense or to the Eagles' offense the previous week. They've got it back on track. Defensively, they're playing sound football. I don't think Rudolph can go in there and do that 2 weeks in a row. I said last week Rudolph did a number on the Chargers when no one expected him a couple of years ago when he was brought in on a Sunday Night Football. He's done it again last week. He won't do it 2 weeks in a row for me. Not in Seattle. Seahawks win and put themselves in a great position to be in the playoffs because they've got the cards in week 18.
Colin, as Brian was kind of alluding to there, for most teams, if you're still spinning the wheel and looking for your quarterback and you're not the Cleveland Browns, you're in an awful lot of trouble. But it hasn't worked out that way for the Steelers as of yet. Is this the week where the shine comes off Rudolph's red nose?
Yeah, I said it last week. I said it'd be a magic month for Pete Carroll and for the Seahawks. The energy, like when they beat the Eagles, was insane. That locker room went bananas, and Pete was cheerleader in chief. He knew that they needed to be picked up off the ground. And he did it. And the fact that, like, what got missed, so Drew Lock got all the love, right, for his game-winning drive because it was, on prime time. Gino led them down the field the other day and a game-winning drive. And I mean, that's just back-to-back when the game was on the line and they needed it, the players have stepped up. And I think that they are going to have enough. I think Mike Tomlin, there was all the talk last week, right? He was having to defend George Pickens. I think that's kind of where Tomlin is at his best, when his back is against the wall. That hasn't been the case this week. The focus has been off the Steelers. So, and having to go to Seattle, I just think that will probably, be the deciding factor in this. I think the 12s, Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, are bound for the playoffs.
Brian, Bengals at Chiefs, you would have thought both of these teams were bound for big things at the start of this season. Indeed, at a certain point, this might have looked like a preview of the AFC Championship game. It's kind of looking a lot less likely now. And the Bengals, as you touched on previously when we were talking about their game against the Steelers the other week, kind of have found a way, unfortunately for them, to melt down in the past couple of games. Chiefs dropped a really bad one over Christmas themselves. They're not right. We've been saying it for a long time. So this is an intriguing fixture, but for probably completely opposite reasons to what we thought would be intriguing about it a few weeks back.
Yeah, it's hard to really know where both sides are, because we thought the Bengals were one of the teams that were dealing with having the backup quarterback the best in terms of how they played, and having that recovery victory against the Vikings, only to kind of lay an egg there last Saturday against the Steelers. I mean, the Chiefs, Colin rightly called her out last week going into that game. I was very keen on the Chiefs. I thought this was a get right type of game. And Colin said I'll lean Chiefs, but I could see a way in which the Raiders keep it tight. And not only do they keep it tight to go and win this game, and it doesn't seem like there's a fear factor to go into Arrowhead this year. And the Bengals have been there before, and they've found ways to win. Even going into the championship game last year, it was Burrow ahead as opposed to Arrowhead. Obviously, he's out of the picture now. I looked at the line on QuinnBet, and this seems quite large for me, Connor. They're minus 7 points. They're essentially expected to win by 8 points or more. And they're not giving this Bengals team, a chance. And I guess that's all down to how they played and how poorly they played last Saturday. I'm going to go Bengals. I still think the Chiefs are going to ruin that loss last weekend. I just don't think things are right there. Offensively, they just can't seem to get any consistency in the game. And okay, the Pacheco's come back in the end, but then obviously he was ruled out of the game. Maybe he's the factor. The Bengals defense, on its day, can get to the quarterback. I think this is another struggle for the Chiefs. And I'll lean Bengals. I'll Bengals for quarterback.
Yeah, I have to say, I still think the Chiefs are closer to being their best selves than the Bengals are. Sorry, let me explain what I mean by that. I mean in personnel terms, not in performance terms by any manner of means. And there's something not right there. They haven't had guys step up on offense at all this season in the way they had last season. They got enough cameos from enough people at the right times, even including our old friend of the show, Kadarius Toney. And that really just hasn't happened this season, bar occasional flashes, and they become a little bit more consistent, to be fair to him, from Rashee Rice. And Pacheco has had a really good season in a sputtering offense. But whatever way you look at it, scheme, you can see how frustrated Mahomes and Kelsey are getting on the sideline as the two guys who are expected to carry the offense. It just hasn't gone in any way, shape, or form the way they would have wanted to have gone all through the season. And, shades of last season about that up to a certain point. And we kept expecting that they would get it right, they'd get it right, and they haven't done so. I do, however, think for this particular game, my feeling is that the Bengals race is pretty much run. I think they got as much as they could get from what they had available to them to get to this point, and credit to them for even being able to dispute a playoff place in the way they have been, given the loss of Burrow and everything else that's happened to them injury-wise this season. But the Chiefs have been there, done that, and the back of your mind is, no team knows better how to navigate the path to the playoffs and get through them in the NFL right now than Kansas City. I just don't see them dropping this one, because they really, really need it now. You might have said that the same about the Raiders game last week, and would have been one that they should have chalked down for a W, and I'm sure they had done. But that slap in the face, that blast of cold water, whatever way you want to phrase it, I think is going to be enough. I do see Kansas City taking this one, Colin.
There's sense to what you're saying, Connor, but the Chiefs have been given the benefit of the doubt week in, week out, and it hasn't worked. And if anything, they've gotten worse. And it's funny, right? Because over the past few years, all the talk was that Bieniemy really didn't do a whole lot. I mean, he was almost reduced to the idea of being a ball boy or a water boy, right? What did Bieniemy do? I mean, and all of a sudden we see what Bieniemy did. He kept people in line, because the issue isn't just that the Chiefs aren't playing well. It's that Patrick Mahomes, as gifted as he is, has absolutely thrown the toys out of the pram. Like the stuff on the sideline, fine, right? If you're having a go at your O-line, Peyton Manning famously went at it with Jeff Saturday. But it's not just the O-line. Like it's everything. It's the facial expressions. It's the stuff that his family are putting up, blaming everyone but himself. He refuses to play in structure. Okay, it's all very well. Yes, Patrick, you have the talent to run around, to play out a structure, but he refuses to play in structure. He is deliberately stepping back, looking, waiting. At some point, Patrick, you have to throw the ball. Like, there are routes, there's a structure to the game, and I know he has the talent, but the rest of it isn't talented. And you are only as good as your worst piece. And if you are going to play the game at a different level, well, that's fine. But the rest of the people aren't there. And yes, Patrick, you can hold the Chiefs accountable and you can have conversations with Brett Veach that he wasted one of your years. But that ain't going to change this week or next week or the playoffs. They can't bring anyone else in. So Patrick has to start playing in structure, and the inability of anyone on the sideline there to rein him in, which is clearly what Bieniemy was willing to do, that to me is a huge concern. I think they're blessed to be playing a Bengals team that, I agree with you, Connor, I think they're beaten up and broken. I just don't think they'll have it. If the Chiefs were playing almost anyone else this week, I'd probably go against them. I think they're absolutely blessed to be going against a Bengals team where the Bengals find themselves currently. But I do think that they have to get things in structure for this season. And yes, you can have conversations afterwards, but it's not even just the receivers. It's the fact that the line, they spent big money, and that hasn't worked out. And for all of the entertainment you get from watching Pacheco run, and there's plenty of memes out there, the guy lacks vision. He misses so many holes. It's unbelievable. And he has had 2 shoulder surgeries this season alone. I have enormous concerns for the Chiefs. Yes, they have Patrick Mahomes. Yes, they have Andy Reid, but they have a host of problems. All that said, I'm going to pick them against the Bengals. I think we've lost Connor, Brian.
We have indeed, yeah. He's clearly in shock at your struggles on Mr. Mahomes. So look, we'll bring it to you, Colin. We'll take it from here. He's still in shock. He's in freeze frame. The Broncos are at home to the Chargers, and we spoke a couple of weeks back around the fact that, here we go. Conor, I'll hand it back over to you. Chargers, Broncos. I'll let you lead it in.
Sorry, apologies. The broadband has obviously had its fair share of cheese and crackers and chocolates and all the rest of it. It's running a bit slow today, like myself. But yeah, Chargers at Broncos. Look, I might lead off on this one before handing it over to you, Brian. But I thought the Chargers were interesting last weekend. You know, we talked about how good the Bills are and how dangerous the Bills are right now as they seem to be kind of getting back in stride. And yet the Chargers gave them plenty of it at the weekend for a team with nothing to play for. And sometimes that can make you a bit of a dangerous floater at this time of the season because players ultimately are playing for their jobs, and that makes them something of a dangerous wounded animal. They're slightly unpredictable. Broncos, as we've seen, were on the boil, going very strongly for 4 or 5 weeks when they had that run of consecutive wins. Had 2 tough losses, though, in the past 2 weeks. Lions forgivable, Patriots slightly less so. 3 weeks ago, Broncos easily dismissed the Chargers 24-7. I don't think it's going to be quite that easy this time out, but ultimately I think this will be a home win in Mile High. Brian, what do you reckon?
I agree. I think it's a Broncos victory. I'm not stalled on it, but bearing in mind how things have played out over the course of the last 2 weeks for the Broncos, because I thought we all felt they were going in a very good spot in terms of, whilst they lost a difficult game against a really strong Lions team, it was there in front of them to beat the Patriots, to beat the Chargers, and then they had to face the Raiders. I mean, you couldn't have wanted a better finish to put yourself in a position to make the playoffs. And Colin said last week, hold your horse here. I think this Patriots game could be a lot tougher than people think. I didn't buy into it, and they come up unstuck. And I ended up watching the game, going into Christmas Day, and what struck me was it just seemed chaotic. Everything seemed in flux. The fans were bought into it because of the nature of how they came back, but everything just seemed to be a bit haywire for me. And we haven't seen that over the course of the last 6 or 7 weeks, because what we saw early on in the season, it seemed to have they moved away from it, and Sean Payton seemed to have got all that under control. And maybe I've completely misinterpreted where they're at right now, but it just struck me. It reminded me of the team we saw earlier on in the season, as opposed to the team that went on that stellar run over the course of the season. And I let Colin take the reins on the Russell Wilson news. And ironically, the quarterback who's going to benefit from Russell Wilson being sat for the 2 weeks is the same one who benefited in Las Vegas last year and put himself in a position to be, one of the highly sought after backups going into the off season. And that's Stidham. He's going to play the next 2 weeks. But I'll let Colin give his thoughts on this, because he's the man doing the Broncos podcast. I'm looking forward to hearing this.
Yeah, like you're talking about the game, but that's not the story. Like, the story is the fact that Russell Wilson has been benched and Jarrett Stidham is the starter. And that is, despite what Rappaport tweeted, this is a football decision. It's not a football decision. It's a 2024 decision. Russell Wilson's time in Denver is done, right? This is over. The reason Russell Wilson has been benched is because he had guaranteed money if he got injured, similar to Derek Carr last year, Jimmy Garoppolo. It's kind of become a clause that may be a death knell in certain instances. The Broncos went on a fantastic run, but ultimately, what was the Broncos' identity during that time? How were the Broncos winning game? I think I described it during that time as like MacGyver. Like, basically they were finding bits of chewing gum and a hair clip and a rubber band and sticking it together to try and win. They got great turnovers, but there was no identity there, and this team has lacked an identity all season. The trade for Russell Wilson made sense. The contract extension for Russell Wilson never made sense. We know a thing or two about public inquiries and tribunals in this country. We should probably have an inquiry genuinely into the details of the Russell Wilson contract extension, because it hasn't even kicked in. Russell Wilson was given a contract extension with 2 years remaining on his current deal, which was last year and this year. It was guaranteed money. So if Russell Wilson is on the Broncos roster on the 5th day of the 2024 league season, his 2025 salary gets guaranteed. I mean, they didn't just give away trade or trade picks and players for Russ. They gave him the keys to the kingdom. Like, only Aaron Rodgers got more out of it. Russ got his own office. Russ got to do what he wanted last year, etc., etc., etc. So the Broncos are moving on. This is what this means. So this is much more than at this point. It doesn't really matter whether the Broncos win out or not. This is about Sean Payton deciding that he is moving on from Russell Wilson. I'm interested to see if the Broncos general manager George Payton survives this, because he is ultimately the man who made that decision. And remember, now the Broncos moved on from Randy Gregory earlier this year. They moved on from Kareem Jackson. They moved on from Frank Clark. So to say free agency has been an unmitigated disaster is actually, in the George Payton era, is actually an understatement. And this will have huge repercussions. Only the Deshaun Watson deal has the potential of being a worse trade and a worse contract in NFL history. And the Broncos, none of this matters, because it's about now, essentially, for Stidham, is this the audition for him to become? Because with the cap hit, the Broncos are going to either have to take $85 million in a cap hit next year, or basically spread it out over the course of 2 seasons, like $40 million and $45 million. That's the question in this. Are they going to run it back with Stidham? Are they going to draft a guy? How are they going to approach this? The questions for the Broncos are much bigger. Again, they're probably haunted to be running into a Chargers team who want to be anywhere else, and who know that they are going to have to cut players to get under the cap next year. This is probably not one that is going to be filled with quality, I would imagine, at the weekend. But it being at home, I'm going to go with the Broncos. But yeah, the fact that they have, as we are on air here, the NFL insiders, they have all 5 insiders, all 5 of them on screen at the same time, talking about the Russell Wilson situation.
The quad box. All right, our final game, Sunday night game. I'm sorry, before we get to Sunday night, I should mention, we didn't say it when we were talking about it, but the Saturday night game, because it is the time of the year that's in it, and it's a nice one for fans, particularly on this side of the Atlantic. The Saturday night game is Lions and Cowboys. That game takes place into the early hours of Sunday morning, our times, 1:15 kickoff there. So worth putting that in the watching diary for the weekend. The Sunday night game, though, is Packers at Vikings, a vital NFC North clash for both of those teams with playoff aspirations still intact. Brian, the Packers had a fairly laboured win against what is, after all, the worst team in the league in the Panthers last time out. The Vikings have been on something of an alarming skid. They've only won 1 of their last 5 games. So both of them arrive with plenty to think about. But who leaves Minnesota with the win?
Yeah, and I think the storyline for this one has kind of come out in the last hour as well. Jaire Alexander has been suspended by the Packers for this game. So they've made a decision that he will not be available. So obviously there's some in-house issues going on there within Green Bay. And the Packers, for me, were getting ahead of themselves a couple of weeks ago. I felt the Giants would beat them, and that says a lot, better than where the Giants are this season. I haven't been sold on them. And the Vikings played really well. And the Vikings played well last week against the Lions team. I mean, the storyline obviously is the Lions coming out on top and winning the division. And we all selected the Lions, but they did put up a better performance, in which we've seen of late. I think one of the killer blows for them now is that Hockenson has been ruled out for the season. So even if they do navigate a way to make the playoffs, to lose their arguably one of their best players on offense, it's going to be a difficult one as well. I'm not sure. This one for me is a bit of a coin flip type of game for me. I think it'll come down to who wants it more. I think the Vikings went in there earlier in the season when the Packers were struggling, and Jordan Love was trying to find himself as a quarterback for this team, and they've kind of put a bit of a beat down on them in Lambeau. I'll go Vikings again. I think the Vikings will find a way, in particular Flores. I think he'll have something in store for Love on Sunday night going into Monday morning, and I think the Vikings give themselves an opportunity come week 18 to potentially make the playoffs.
Yeah, I can see the logic in that, but I'm ultimately going to go with where my head was at the start of the season. I said the Vikings would miss the playoffs, and I said I think the Packers might be a sneaky shout to make the playoffs ultimately. I think given everything that's happened in Minnesota, it's great credit to the Vikings that they're even in the conversation at this time. You know, they've put it together with, as you said, Colin, they've kind of MacGyvered it at times to get to this position. And Brian Flores has been the standout coordinator this year on either side of the ball. It's been sensational what he's done. He's kind of rewriting the book for defensive coordinators this season, particularly given the talent or lack thereof that he has at his disposal. I mean, can you imagine what Brian Flores would do with the tools that the Packers have? Notwithstanding that Jaire Alexander is in the bad books for whatever reason. I mean, given what they have there and Rashawn Gary and Preston Smith and others, the Packers are, you would think, very well set to get rid of Rasul Douglas earlier this season as well. They had some pretty good weapons on that side of the ball. Jury's still out in Jordan Love. I think at times he's looked really good. At times it's been a little bit of a work in progress. Still, we have to underline a very young receiver core. At times, we've seen the LaFleur magic pull it all together. We talked about him prior to this season as being Mr. December. He'd never lost a game in December prior to this year. That record is no longer intact, but I don't think he'll be adding to the debit column this weekend. I think Green Bay will get out of here with a win. Colin.
I really like Green Bay's offense, and I think they've done a great job of developing Jordan Love. Talked about it previously. Development isn't always linear, so there have been some missteps along the way. And you're right, Connor. If they had Brian Flores coaching this Packers defense, my goodness, I think.
No one's happier than me that they don't.
Yeah. Hey, I know Gary Murphy at TCU. I think, given that the Lions just won it, because I think if they had Brian Flores coaching it, the Lions may not be the division champions. But the fact is that they do have him. and he is a real issue. And the fact that Jair Alexander got suspended, by all accounts, from what I understand, because he decided to crash the coin toss, and he wasn't a game day captain, and so he crashed it and basically overruled the coaches. And I think that's why, because again, you have to, there has to be some sort of semblance of order on these things. Means that he won't be able to, and himself and Justin Jefferson have had plenty to say to one another over the past few years. It's been a little bit like Josh Norman and OBJ, without the level of violence that those two gentlemen used to engage in, but it certainly was decent battles. I think the Vikings, like the interceptions are the issue, and I wonder, will they start Nick Mullins? I don't know if that's been confirmed. There was talks that they might go back to the rookie, which says everything. But I think that they can take advantage of the Packers' issues, because Joe Barry has shown no willingness to learn from his mistakes. And again, this is not just recent weeks. This has been going on for years at this point. I think Jefferson and the Vikings can take advantage of that and win a high scoring game. Again, could the Packers absolutely go out and win this? Yes, they could. But I think this will be a high scoring game, and I think that the Vikings come out on the right side of it.
All right, that's it for our Week 17 picks.
A lot of games, a lot of action, and a lot of specials with QuimBet. In fairness, they came on during the season. I just wanted to give them a final shout out to them. They've been very supportive of the show. They're providing us with great merchandise this week. 18 plus, do gamble responsibly. And but there's a lot of games, a lot of interesting odds, because if you look at the Lions, Connor, across the league this weekend, a lot of games that are, shall we say, up for grabs, because it's so tight, and obviously a lot of excitement with 2 weeks to go.
Great stuff. We're looking forward to it. It'll all be here on the Irish NFL Show. We'll talk to you very soon.